I'm in an excellent mood. Giddy? I would say I'm giddy. I think we all should be. If you've come to this particular show, The Intersection, with Michael Popok on Midas for some sort of doom and gloom, grim reaper about with hand wringing as an added byproduct, you've come to the wrong podcast, folks, because I believe my eyes and I believe in America and in just as I believed in the civil rights movement and I believed in our anti-war movement and people taking to the streets against the corrupt administration, whether that be the Nixon administration or any other administration. I believe in America. What did I just see and you just saw on Saturday, both individually and cumulatively? We saw tens of millions of Americans take to the streets to demand their country back. It's not about making America great again. It's about making America America again. And people have quickly figured out that it's in their best interests and is in line with their morals and values and patriotism to use their courage to hit the streets despite many, many odds, an out of control administration that could use ICE, the National Guard, Border Patrol, or any other federal police force at any given moment. But 9 or 10 million people, whatever the final number is, decided that on a Saturday, for the third time for the No Kings March, they wanted to get together with fellow Americans and with one voice declare that Donald Trump's administration is over, that his goose, the proverbial goose, is cooked, and to be heard and to be seen. And it's not an example of the Trump derangement syndrome therapy session, which is what the White House labeled it. They're going to be in for a big shock at midterms. They should already be in for a big shot. And think about a big shock. And think about what we've watched over the last year. Add up all the 5501 protests, the 3 No Kings Day, the hands-off protest. You're talking about 20% of the electorate, even higher percentage of the adult voting body taking to the streets against Donald Trump. And if that was not a message enough that should have been received loud and clear by the Trump administration, who, as far as I'm concerned, and to paraphrase Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, this administration is as dead as fried chicken. If that wasn't enough, look at the results of special elections in places like Florida, and not just any part of Florida. Ruby Red West Tampa, that never votes for a Democrat, just elected not only a Democrat, a union leader, Navy man, to be the state senator from that region. And in Donald Trump's front and backyard, in Palm Beach and in the district that's been drawn for state legislators, we get the candidate that Donald Trump wanted to defeat. He promoted the adversary. He voted, pardon me, for the adversary with a mail-in ballot, ironically, lost. In other words, he lost, Trump lost, and the candidate won. And she's already considered to be a rock star, and as well she should. But that's now 31-0 for Democrats to flip red seats blue at a winning rate of about 25% in deep red areas that haven't gone Democrat in 20 or 30 years. So, yes, let's take a moment not to lose our resolve, not to lose our commitment, not to lose our focus, but to celebrate each other and celebrate the community that you're a part of, that you've helped build, and that you are willing to go through chicken wire and crawl on your belly to protect our democracy and rule of law. That's what I saw when I saw tens of millions of people head into parks and streets and alleys and peacefully protest. And that protest movement, which scares the crap out of the Trump administration and Donald Trump. They don't say it externally. The propaganda minister, Carolyn Levitt, or Donald Trump, when he's, caught for a question, don't deny that it's having any impact at all on their political fortunes, on Donald Trump's popularity. He'll point to some weird stat like 100% of MAGA thinks he's doing a great job. That's like saying 100% of the Trump family thinks that Donald Trump is doing a great job, right? MAGA, whatever that is, whatever's left of it, is such a small percentage now of the population, the voting population. I don't know, 25%, maybe 30%. That's what the polls say. When Fox News, when the best news you have all week is Fox News saying that 60% of America rejects you as an administration, you're not having a great week. And those aren't fake polls, because every time people have had an opportunity to vote at a real polling place, they've rejected Donald Trump. I had Sky Perryman, who leads Democracy Forward, who has sued the Trump administration a couple of hundred times already. We went through just get this number. Back when Ben and I were doing Legal AF at the top of the administration, even before, when he was president-elect, I said, if the Trump administration was sued 1,000 times in the first administration, you can quadruple it and make it 4,000 times. We've already beat that number. If you add in the habeas corpus petitions, the due process petitions filed by individuals, and you combine it with the cases against the Trump administration by Democracy Forward, the Attorneys General, the American Civil Liberties Union, okay, we're already at 3,000 or 4,000 cases. 800 cases already just against the administration, separate and apart from these individual habeas corpus petitions. What does that tell you? Now, one of the things we'll focus on here on the intersection is listen, I don't want to get fatigued or with words, hyperbolic words, but this is a historic, momentous oral argument at the United States Supreme Court that goes up at 10 a.m. tomorrow Eastern time, live feed on Legal AF YouTube channel. All you got to do is hit the live tab. I'll be there at 9:45 to kind of be your spirit guide through the birthright citizenship argument. This is existential for our America. Who is an American? Are there different types of Americans? Is a naturalized American better than or different than a native-born American? How many generations of being an American do you have to be a patriot, to be entitled to all the entitlements of being an American? Do you have to be a heritage American? What is a heritage American? How many generations back do you have to go before, in order to declare yourself an American? Is that what this country is about? That we're going, and this is what Trump wants it to be about, that we're going to divide people categorically, almost genetically, sounds like something that happened in the 1930s in a country called Germany, about, who we are as Americans. The 14th Amendment defines who we are as Americans. Donald Trump wants to take that away from you, plain and simple. There's an easy exit strategy for the Supreme Court. I'll talk about it when we get to that particular moment. But the No Kings March is important. So I had Sky Perryman on Democracy Forward. She's going to be going up, I think, tomorrow on Midas in my interview. And we talked about what is the impact of the crowds and the courage on the courts. In other words, does it help her, the ACLU, the Attorneys General, Democracy Forward, does it help her in her cases? She said, absolutely. It is the fuel. It gives enthusiasm and momentum and encouragement to the lawyers who work 15, 18, 20-hour days, round the clock, to file these emergency. Every time you hear emergency filing, just think there were a dozen human beings or more working until 4 o'clock in the morning drafting papers. I've been there. I've done it. I've spent 36 hours once working on a brief that had to be filed in federal court. That's what emergency applications mean. And this entire administration has been one giant emergency on purpose, of his own making, in order to try to expand his powers. But he's hitting brick walls left and right. And so she talked about how important it is to her legal team, to the judges, to know that they are not screaming into a void, that they are defending. They want to know that the people that they're defending the rule of law for care about it, right? And they're not just either despondent or checked out of our democracy. We already had an example of millions of Americans sitting out our democracy and elections, Kamala versus Donald Trump. I don't know if that number's 3 million or 20 million, but whatever, that we can fight over the number. But what it reflects is people sat out our participatory democracy, which I've said is a contact sport. And I mean that not violently, but positively. You've got to be in the game. You can't be on your couch. Not that our audience is ever, frankly, on their couch. So the crowds are important, both to generate momentum, to stay connected, to have this beautiful chaos of our democracy spill out into the streets in a positive way, not with people with Nazi banners or white supremacy banners or right-wing MAGA banners or my way or the highway or America's only for Americans, things that we saw at rallies. That's one thing. That's one indication to me that Donald Trump knows he's losing. You don't see a lot of rallies. He's doing a lot of, to use a golf game analogy, he's working on his short game. He's working on his 3-foot putts. He really doesn't leave the Oval Office much. It's a lot of, crossing the lawn of the Oval, the White House, or heading to a golf game, or, what, very little. You don't see speeches, rallies, ribbon cuttings. Even he's worried. It's a lot of last minute phone calls in to Fox News. Like before I got on the air, my editors told me, hey, he just told Ducey on Fox News that he's going tomorrow to the birthright citizenship oral argument. I immediately wrote, no, he's not. He said the exact same thing about tariffs. He just got through bashing. It's not even working the refs. He just got through bashing and trying to demoralize the United States Supreme Court just yesterday about birthright citizenship. He already embarrassed the crap out of them, or tried to, at the State of the Union address. And I don't know if anybody's been fortunate enough to go behind the red velvet curtain, literally, and go to the United States Supreme Court. I've been there on a tour and once for an oral argument. It is not that big of a room. And he will be very noticeable if he were to appear and sit in the gallery. And I also joked that it might remind him of being an indicted and convicted felon and having to sit at the defendant's table. And maybe he's not ready for that either. So just like he said, and I'll be with you, coming off the ellipse, I'm going to march on the Capitol. I'll see you there. And then quickly headed back to the White House to stew in the dining room. I think we're going to see something similar. I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll interrupt the live feed of Legal AF on the Legal AF YouTube channel of the Supreme Court oral argument. I'll pop up and I'll say I was wrong. Look, there he is. Or we've heard he's in the room, because we're going to have to do it from court watchers. This is an audio feed only. But as I started tonight's intersection, I'm giddy. We can't just wring our hands or our necks all the time about, our political fortunes. I feel pretty darn good. Now, lots of things have to fall into place. And won't we be the better when, having had all of these barriers and hurdles to voting put up in front of us by Donald Trump and his minions, the mail-in ballots and the timing of the mail-in ballots and the post office now, who trusts the post office? The post office now getting involved for Donald Trump, and registration, and them trying to steal our voter data or steal our social security data in order to steal our voter data, and all of these things that they're doing. Isn't it just making you mad and making you focused like a laser beam, like a fighter jet pilot on voting? Seriously, sometimes that's all. I have a dream about voting. If you have dreams about voting, put that in tonight's comments. We're live, everybody, if you didn't know. Boo. And if you have questions for me, put them in comments. My team will catch it. I'll try to answer some before I take the first commercial break. But it's just, it's very similar in my real life to my litigation practice. I was a trial lawyer for 35 years, going back to my 35th law school graduation, reunion at Duke in the middle of April with my family. And I haven't been back to campus in a long time, since before COVID. I think I went back for the 20th. And, I take stock of my career and looking back and all of that. And whenever an adversary, and even to this day, I have some cases now, whenever an adversary like pisses the shit out of me, does something that's below the belt, or, drops the brief on Friday night, or writes a nasty email and then disappears, passive aggressively, it just motivates me. I get so focused on the response, on the hearing, on the trial. It just has the opposite effect. It's like in sport, when your adversary says something stupid, like, I think their defense sucks. And then the team goes out and racks up, whatever sport you're in, 50 points before the half. Or 10 runs in baseball, whatever it is, and they put it up in the bulletin board, or social media posts in the locker room, and same thing here. Internalize these attacks on our voting rights, our sacred voting rights, and make sure you pay them back. That's what we need. And then when we sail over, every time they keep trying to ratchet up, continuing my sport metaphor, they keep ratcheting up the high bar. 5 foot, nope, 5'5", 6 foot, 7 foot, and we sail over it to victory, we can look back and wave at Donald Trump and MAGA, because they'll slip back under that rock they came out from under, in the middle of the night 4 years ago and 8 years ago. So I also had Jamie Raskin on. Got a lot of great content up on Legal AF YouTube channel, where I do a fair number of videos on Midas, but on Legal AF YouTube channel, this week alone, I interviewed Jamie Raskin, Representative Raskin, who will be the chair of the Judiciary Committee when the Democrats get the gavel back at the midterms. We talked about a lot of different things, including the weaponization of the FBI to go after Eric Swalwell, who's not only a representative in Congress and former prosecutor, but the leading candidate to replace term-limited Gavin Newsom as the California governor. And suddenly, Kash Patel has nothing better to do than open up 10-year-old files, investigative files that led to no charges against anybody, and release them as a political hatchet job against somebody that Kash Patel, in his book, Gangster Government by Gangsters, or Gangster Government, listed Eric Swalwell in the top 60 of people he wanted to get out of Congress. And now they're going to release some sort of investigation about some Chinese person that worked in Swalwell's office 10 years ago that resulted in nothing, and no evidence that he knew that right. Let me get this straight. Can I just, sometimes in doing my jury work and working with juries, you just have to go to the straight scoop, the logic. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, ladies and gentlemen of our audience, do you think Eric Swalwell of the House of Representatives, Donald Trump's second impeachment manager, who's running for governor of California, purposely hired somebody he knew to be a Chinese communist operative to do fundraising for him in San Francisco? I don't even know for what purpose, to be an asset of the Chinese government. Does anybody believe that? And that's what Kash Patel, on behalf of Donald Trump, wants people to believe by dumping some file. And I heard the justification. I asked Jamie Raskin about it. Like Jamie said, yeah, people said, oh, it's just like the Epstein files. You dumped all those. Like, no, there's a law, first of all, for the Epstein files. Second of all, the law is in place and supported by 435 members of Congress out of 435, because of the whiff of scandal and breach of ethics around the Department of Justice, that they can't be trusted. Hence the law. That's not Eric Swalwell. So it was a very interesting interview. It's up on Legal AF YouTube channel. In fact, as long as we're there, we got a clip Representative Raskin, I think you'll find interesting.
Government. The whole America First thing is such a fraud because, in fact, Trump and the mega elite spend all of their time with rich people from other countries, either rich dictators, people like Putin and Orban and the people who run the authoritarian states they emulate, or the businessmen, or some combination thereof. Like Jared Kushner brought back more than $2 billion from the Sovereign National Fund of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. That's who they hang around with. They're not interested in America First. That was just a completely predatory slogan that they used to get votes. But they've been selling out the country just day in and day out. And their violations of the Foreign Emoluments Clause are just legion. Nothing in American history comes close to the amount of money that they have brought in from foreign states, kings, and princes without any consent from Congress, which is what the Constitution requires. And they're ripping off the taxpayers directly through the millions of dollars spent at the Trump hotels and golf courses and the stuff that we used to talk about, but now it's so penny ante compared to the crypto scams and the billions of dollars that they're bringing in from abroad.
Who puts it more eloquently than Jamie Raskin? I love the way he put that about the America First was a predatory slogan, populist predatory slogan that they had no intention of fulfilling, but was a scam to get votes. And we're watching the outcome of it. I just saw statistics in the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg yesterday that said that tax revenue from corporations is going to be down 65 to 70 billion dollars this year. In other words, the big, beautiful bill tax cuts rewarded companies like Meta, Amazon, and the rest to the tune of $70 billion, meaning that $70 billion that the government took less that the government took in, and it's going to put it on the backs of ordinary Americans. When Donald Trump pays back the French government or the French investors $1 billion because he doesn't want to have wind turbines, he doesn't believe in wind energy or alternate energy forms, where'd the $1 billion come from? He's just, he's like I would say a riverboat gambler with nothing to lose, but he's just, playing with house money, playing with the people's money. To him, it's monopoly money. To us, it's real hard-earned dollars that we have turned over through tax receipts to the government, and we expect fair stewardship. We don't get that. We just get wasted money. How many children could be educated? How much internet connectivity could we have? How many homeless people could we shelter, the unhoused? How many people could go to school of their choice with $70 billion? I mean, you've got a war in Iran that's clicking off at $1 million a minute. Think about that. By the time I'm done with this comment, that was $1 million of your money and my money that disappeared into thin air or landed on the heads of the Iranians. So let's talk about the Iran war, shall we? As Donald Trump in front of us morphs and shapeshifts his position. It's almost hard to keep track. Fortunately, you have the Midas Touch Network at Legal AF, and we're paid or not paid to keep track. And so you've got Donald Trump's trying to redefine what victory looks like. So at the start of the war on the 28th of February, the military objectives were to force regime change, to get a new Ayatollah, to stop their nuclear program, I guess, and to make sure they stop by proxy war, tormenting the Middle East, Israel, and upsetting the oil and energy markets. And now we're down to Donald Trump saying to insiders that he's willing to leave in the next 2 weeks because he's worried about gas prices and what it does to his political fortunes, and that he knows now he'll never be able to unblockade the Strait of Hormuz, where 27% of the world's natural gas and oil come through. He claims, like a 5-year-old, with a 5-year-old. No, a 5-year-old would have a better understanding of economics. That's not our oil and natural gas. That's the Europeans' oil and natural gas. And so they should go fix the problem. No, that's 27% of the world's energy. And if that gets stuck there, then that will lead to a major recession / depression throughout the European Union, throughout all of the markets we need for our goods, as we hear the sputtering sound of the economic engine of Central, Western, and Eastern Europe and Asia come to a halt. And so we're back to this bullshit America first approach. It's not my oil. It's not my natural gas. Well, first of all, 15% of the natural gas supply has been destroyed because of attacks by Israel on Iran, on Kuwait, and the rest. And so think of it as fungible, right? It's the world's energy supply. That's what the Federal Reserve Chair Jay Powell talked about at Harvard University this week. He called it energy shock. It's energy. It's now just a term, energy shock. We have energy shock. And what do we do with energy shock in the economy? He says, I really don't know. He said the Federal Reserve doesn't have much control over that. We hope it ends soon. Is the best that he could come up with. Now, he's not going out of his way either to help the Trump administration, but they're not going to do something silly like turn on the spigots of free money in order to solve Donald Trump's problem of his own making. And if the energy shock lasts another month or two and rolls into June, that energy shock will become a recession. In fact, I'm pretty sure that when economists look back at this quarter in our economy, they're going to say the recession started. We are already seeing the telltale signs of a recession. Joblessness, no job creation. Inflation, stubborn inflation, week after week, day after day for 5 years straight. Gas prices cracking $4. Donald Trump's remark to that in the White House while he was busy signing illegal unconstitutional orders. $4 in return for a safe world and no nuclear program for Iran. I think that's a pretty good deal. Yeah, because you don't pay for your gas. And that is the equivalent of taking out of the American household about $2,000 a year. That's a lot of money. That's the difference between living with dignity and not living with dignity for many Americans in this country. And Donald Trump, well, if go up and as if oil hits $138 a barrel, and we're at 109 now, and stays there, it's instantly a recession throughout the world. And so the economy matters, and it's one of the major reasons. There's as I half joked, almost gallows humor with Ben on Saturday on Legal AF, that I've never seen an administration that has 2 third rails. You know, in subway parlance, the third rail is the electrified rail. If you ever fall, God forbid, onto subway tracks, stay away from the third rail. Don't grab it. Donald Trump has 2 third rails, and he keeps grabbing them. One of them is Iran, right? Related to the economy, and the other is all the other corruption scandals in his administration, including related to Epstein, and he keeps grabbing them at the same time. And included in the third rail is immigration and migration policy, which has been resoundingly rejected by the American people. And now it's gotten so bad. Now we know, when you peel away the onion, who the inner circle is for Donald Trump's advisors. It seems to be 2 people: Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, and Melania Trump. Yes, fresh off her documentary tour. That's all he's listening to, apparently, when it comes to his political fortunes. And there's new reporting that they want Stephen Miller to go. Stephen Miller, the Dark Knight, the shadowy figure, the guy that runs everything related to immigration and migration policy. He's so bad that Todd Lyons, the head of ICE, his people, according to reports, run around with a defibrillator behind him in case he has a panic attack / cardiac arrest, because he can't take the abuse every morning at 10 a.m. that is doled out by Stephen Miller. I need more removals and deportations. He did the math. Stephen Miller. 1 million people in a year, I need 3,000 a day. I need 3,000 heads on my desk every day. But they're not doing that. It's now down to about 1,200 a day. Hopefully, fair amount of people who are criminals. But Trump sees what the vote numbers look like, the polling numbers look like for his immigration policy, and he's blaming Stephen Miller. That's why, against Stephen Miller's recommendation, Kristi Noem got fired. Corey Lewandowski got fired. And now Mark Wayne Mullen has taken over, along with Tom Homan. And it's hard to believe that in this administration, Tom Homan, the border czar, the guy that took bribes, allegedly, is the voice of reason about immigration policy. But Trump's got to turn something around. I mean, you'd have to be, it is a definition of insanity if he rides with this same administration cabinet all the way to the midterms and doesn't try to throw other people other than name Kristi Noem under the bus. It would be a definition of insanity. I mean, if I were Donald Trump, God forbid, already gone would be RFK Jr., Pam Bondi, Pete Hegseth, and Stephen Miller for getting him into this mess. But Trump has a little nasty little habit. He clings on to these people, these bootlickers and sycophants. Like Elon Musk is back, as you might have heard, advising him and being on phone calls with the leaders of Pakistan, telling the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which laws they should pass about about corporate regulation. And why is he back? Why is another wolf back in the chicken hen? Let me answer a couple of questions, but first, as long as we're here, I've got it was exciting news, maybe one of the reasons I'm giddy. We found out today that a award group called the Webbies, that Midas Touch won last year, 2 of our shows, including this one, The Intersection, made it to the top 5 finalists for Legal AF for news and The Intersection for new podcast, top 5. And there's a people choice component to this. So we're going to put in the links below, if you want to, and you can see fit to free vote on the Webby's website with the links below and help us capture those awards. I'd actually be more honored if we win. Maybe the committee shouldn't hear this. Committee, if you're listening, turn off your ears. Put your fingers in your ears. I would be more honored if the public voted for us and our audience voted for us than if a random committee selected us. I'll take both. But if you said to me, which would you could only have one. Which would you rather have? I'd rather have the people's choice part of the Webbies for The Intersection. We've been around less than a year. I'm honored already. I feel like I'm at the Oscars. I'm honored already to be in this group of 5. Thousands and thousands and thousands of submissions. Last year, 5 million people voted in the Webby Awards. And so I'm hoping to encourage you to do the same thing here. Let me answer some questions from our audience that have come up. Could Trump blanketly pardon all administration officials? This is from Fran. As he walks out the door. Yes. What are the limitations? None. I mean, I'm not trying to, me, I don't blow smoke or sunshine on any show that I do. The universal, unchallengeable power under the Constitution of a president to provide a pardon is never going to be challenged, no matter how disgusting or heinous the person. Even the issue of self-pardon has not been challenged yet at the United States Supreme Court, but based on some questions and answers that came up during the immunity Supreme Court oral argument, I'm not so sure there's 5 votes to reject an attempt to self-pardon. And when I listen to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, I'm like, uh-oh, if the issue of self-pardon ever comes up, I think these 2 are in the bag. So again, I'm not trying to be the Grim Reaper. I started off the show giddy, but that is the truth. Luz Veritas asks, what is the likelihood of Trump's SCOTUS MAGA 6 ruling in his favor on mail-in voting? We'll talk about that. He or she says it's very likely. Keep my fingers crossed. Based on the oral argument, it looks bad for mail-in ballots, meaning you can use a mail-in ballot, but state grace periods, giving people, like Mississippi's version, 5 business days to have your election day, postmarked ballot show up and be counted in that election are going to go by the wayside. I think it's an 80% chance based on the oral argument. Sometimes they surprise me. It'll be one of the last, if not the last, decision that they render at the end of June or towards the end of June. It's not looking good. I think we're going to get twin shitty decisions on, those are legal terms, on voting. I think the Voting Rights Act Section 2 is on life support, and it'll be unplugged by the Supreme Court in a case called Calais. And I think they're going to kill mail-in ballots as we know it as well. Already today, Donald Trump, but you should know, it's sort of like a Formula One race. The engines are revving for all of the public interest groups like Mark Elias and Norm Eisen and Democracy Forward to file the lawsuit. They've already got it drafted. But today, Donald Trump decided to start signing executive orders about mail-in ballots, thinking that he's probably going to win at the Supreme Court on that particular issue. And again, trying to F with the state's rights and state power to regulate federal elections and voting and balloting. In fact, I think we have a clip of Donald Trump talking about just such a thing in response to a question from a reporter.
Okay, so that's a big deal. Very proud of it. And I don't know how it can be challenged. You'll probably challenge it. You may say, find a rogue judge. You get a lot of rogue judges. Very bad people, very bad judges. But that's the only way that can be changed. And hopefully we'll win on appeal if it is. But I don't see how anybody can challenge it. I don't see how they can challenge it. And remember, it's about voter integrity. We want to have honest voting in our country, because if you don't have honest voting, you can't have really a nation, if you want to know the truth. Howard, I'll give that to you.
Yeah, you can't have a nation. Donald Trump having lost an election that he didn't want to acknowledge, and now when the midterms come, and hopefully it's the tidal wave that we all expect it to be, he's going to have a lot of he's really setting himself up for failure. Remember that phrase? Because this is just going to annoy, effing with my mail-in ballot or registrations related to it. And that's something, that's a public service announcement I want to make here on the intersection. Wherever you are tomorrow, go on whatever database the state provides, or your local election office provides, and figure out whether you are registered to vote for the midterms or not. It's a 50-50 shot that you've been purged, that the way that you want to vote has changed, that you need to check another box or fill out another application or provide another form of identification depending upon whether you're in a red or blue state. Do not wait till November. Do it now in the comfy confines of your home, or if you're on the road, check it now. It's like, when you're on a flight and they tell you, put on your own oxygen mask before you aid the person next to you. Make sure your own registration is straightened out before you start working around the clock to bring in other new voters and bring them to the polls for however they allow us to finally vote. Eventually this musical chairs is going to stop, and it's going to be election day or early voting day or whatever it's going to be. And so this is your opportunity now to start contributing. It'll make you feel good too. Made me feel good when I went and double checked. Okay, got my precinct. Yeah, I'm in. I vote. That's all. I got it. Okay, perfect. Great. So I'm gonna answer one more question here. How do you think the justices will vote on the citizenship issue? I'm gonna take that from Sharon Smith. I'm gonna take that after our first break. On the getting rich. Okay, James McLean asks, who is getting rich on the high price of fuel? Guess. Donald Trump infamously brought together the oil industry into Mar-a-Lago for a chopped steak dinner. Not kidding. Sponsored by the head of Occidental Oil, the head of the oil lobby group, and all the oil barons. This was like a smoke-filled room out of the early 1900s. It's like the robber barons reunion. And he told them, and he hasn't denied it, give me $1 billion and I'll defeat Kamala Harris, and you can rewrite energy policy and environmental policy. And they said, we'll take it. They gave him about a quarter of that, but that with some other money that was raised was more than enough for Donald Trump. And he's been in the back pocket of big oil ever since. So there's crocodile tears over the high price of oil and the high price of gasoline because the people that supported him are making a shit ton of money. And that's why he wants to kill renewable and alternative energy to get everybody to have their addiction continue on oil and fossil fuels. Those are the industries that supported him the most. Apparently, it wasn't the wind turbine industry or the solar panel industry. It was these other industries with, who make trillions of dollars a day off of our hardship. I wouldn't call it price gouging, but I don't see them going out of the way. None of these companies did. The companies that save $65 billion in taxes, do you think they're passing any of that along to the consumer who buys their products or services? No. There's going to be a small portion returned to their investors, a huge portion that's given as a bonus to their executives, and the rest are locked out in the cold, right? So when so many different ways to support my work here on the intersection, Midas Touch, Legal AF. If you don't know me, if it's like the first time on the show, could be. I'm Michael Popok, co-founder of Legal AF, the podcast, along with Ben Mysalis, Legal AF, the YouTube channel that I do in collaboration with the Midas Touch Network. We're trying to get to 1.1 million subscribers to give us that continued street cred to be able to bring in the Jamie Raskins, the heads of the American Civil Liberties Union, the Governor Shapiros, the Senator Blumenthals, and just the commentary of our contributors. We do 12 videos a day. So the only thing we ask is that you just free support and free subscribe on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. Then Legal AF, the YouTube channel begat Legal AF, the Substack, where what an amazing community there. I do a live a day, try to do 2. I get 1,000 to 2,000, sometimes 3,000 people. Wednesday, here's a programming announcement. Tomorrow, I'm going to have Scott McFarlane. Yes, if you've been under a rock like Rip Van Winkle or under a tree, Scott McFarlane is now Midas's White House and DC anchor, editor, bureau chief, and has a daily show on Midas, formerly of I forget the name of the network. It was around for a long time. Anyway, Scott McFarlane, who does a fair amount of legal and political news breaking as well. We spoke offline. We're like, this is perfect. Let's do work together on Legal AF. And won't you join me on a Substack Live someday? And Scott said, I'd love to. What are you doing on Wednesday? So Wednesday around noon Eastern time, Scott McFarlane is going to join me on my daily live on Substack. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button there. We got a paid button. You can help support everything that we do. And we talked about the Webby Awards. The links are below for you to vote. Now would be a good time to vote as well. And then we've got brand new sponsors. This is our first couple of sponsors ever for the intersection. Love having them here. They know our point of view. They know there's no censorship. This is independent commentary and journalism at its best. And here's a word from our sponsors. The playoff push is heating up and tournament hoops are here. And there's no better way to cash in on the high-flying hoops action than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. Every bucket, every dime, and every win means more when you're playing on Prize Picks. So don't pass up your next shot with Prize Picks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Look, I've been playing Prize Picks recently, and honestly, I don't know why I waited so long. It's super simple to get started, and the app makes watching games way more fun. For example, I'm looking at Jalen Brunson's points projection for the next Knicks game and going with more. It just makes every possession way more exciting to follow. Prize Picks is simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. I also love that you can mix different sports in one lineup or stack multiple projections from the same player. And with early payouts, if your player gets off to a hot start, you can choose to cash out before the game even ends. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code INTERSECTION to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code INTERSECTION to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. The other day I was looking at my daughter and realizing how fast she's growing. It's one of those things you don't notice day to day, but then suddenly her clothes don't fit. She's on to the next stage of school, and you're wondering where the time went. And it's moments like that that make you think differently, not just about how fast things are changing, but whether you're actually keeping up, especially when it comes to protecting your loved ones and planning for their future. That's why I've been looking at Policy Genius. It's an online marketplace where you can compare life insurance quotes from some of America's top insurers, all in one place for free. Their licensed team works for you, helping you find the right coverage, answer your questions, and handle the paperwork. So it's simple and straightforward. It's just a smart way to make sure the life you're building and the people you care about most are protected. Protect your family with a policy that grows with your life. With Policy Genius, you can see if you can find 20-year life insurance policies starting at just $276 a year for $1 million in coverage. Head to policygenius.com/truth to compare life insurance quotes from top companies and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/truth. And we are back. Some people, I think my sarcasm or my tongue-in-cheek got lost in people. I know that Scott McFarlane worked at CBS. I was being funny, trying to be funny about, I can't remember the name of that legacy media company, but no, I know where he came from. I know where he came. I try not to mention these other entities. Used to be the Tiffany Network, the network of Edward R. Murrow, 60 Minutes, Mike Wallace. Remember, Mike Wallace was out the door. He used to lead to cardiac arrest. No longer. Barry Weiss at the door just doesn't have the same ring to it, do you think? But I'm so glad that Midas is expanding the way that it's expanding, and that I get the byproduct of that, Legal AF, that I get this amazing, award-winning, newly unshackled Scott McFarlane. Really, really pleased about that. Speaking of what I'm pleased about, we just had a federal judge do exactly what I thought he was going to do. Isn't that nice? And punctuated by 18 exclamation marks. Oh, yes, I counted. Judge Leon, Richard Leon, senior status judge in the District of Columbia Federal Court, just ruled before we came on the air, and he red tagged the ballroom project. There's no other way to put it. He put up a big stop work order. If he worked for code enforcement, he would be riding by, put a big red tag on it, and tell him stop work. Now, it's still just a giant hole in the ground. They're doing a lot of below ground work, and they haven't done the vertical construction yet. And what I reported on a couple of days ago actually came true. I said that there were a couple of votes. One was really phony, and one I'm sure was going to be phony, by two fine arts commissions and the National Planning Commission, all under Donald Trump's control. The Fine Arts Commission took 12 minutes to unanimously approve the ballroom design and its blueprint and its arc and its plans. 12 minutes. I've done some zoning work and to try to get land use approvals, and I've spent weeks, hours with committees to try to get approvals of a flagpole or a shutter or something. The entire deficient plan with staircases going to nowhere and doors opening into bathrooms. Main doors opening into bathroom corridors. This got approved in 12 minutes. And so there was a vote coming up Thursday of the Planning Commission. And I said, where is Judge Leon? He's been sitting since the beginning of March on a preliminary injunction by the National Trust to stop the ballroom as a violation of several laws. Effectively, the argument is there is no express statute that gives the president the right to do anything but like pull up the shabby carpet and paint the trim and do some common area maintenance for the house for as long as he's the temporary occupant. What it doesn't give them the right to do without congressional approval and or funding, appropriations, is to tear down the East Wing and put up a new East Wing in the form of a golden royal ballroom. And it seems pretty obvious. And the three statutes that Donald Trump relied on, not only is it nowhere in there, but they're completely irrelevant. At best, they stand for the proposition that you need to get congressional approval before you do anything with the people's house. You are a temporary occupant. Or as Judge Leon put it, with exclamation marks. I'll read some of it to you. Congress has the keys to all federal land. They're the landlord, ultimately. They and the Park Service have to approve all these things. Now, Judge Leon's not saying that Congress won't approve it. It's just that they haven't approved it. And Donald Trump was too cute by half. He thought he'd do an end run around having to go to Congress because he's not going to use taxpayer money, which is already a lie. Every time somebody on the White House staff does anything related to the ballroom on taxpayer dollars, he is using taxpayer dollars. That the construction costs may or may not be being paid by corporate America or people that are trying to get Donald Trump in their back pocket or vice versa is of no moment. It doesn't mean you can do what you want because somebody else is paying for it. Okay? Like, well, I robbed a bank, but I didn't drive my own car. Is that okay? Good for you. So some of Judge Leon obviously exasperated. You can tell by the amount of exclamation marks he wrote. Let me just read to you from the end of his decision. This is the conclusion. Where does this leave us? Judge Leon writes, unfortunately for defendants, that's the Trump group, unless and until Congress blesses this project through statutory authorization, construction has to stop! Exclamation mark. But here is the good news. It's not too late for Congress to authorize the continued construction of the ballroom project. The president may at any time go to Congress to obtain express authority to construct a ballroom and to do so with private funds. Indeed, Congress may even choose to appropriate funds for the ballroom or decide that some other funding scheme is acceptable. Either way, Congress will thereby retain its authority over the nation's property and its oversight over the government's spending. That's House and Senate combined. The national trust interest in a constitutional and lawful process will be vindicated, and the American people will benefit from the branches of government exercising their constitutionally prescribed roles. Not a bad outcome, comma, that, exclamation mark, Judge Leon. Now, he wrote one thing in there that, of course, Donald Trump's trying to drive a truck through, a loophole. It's an open hole now. So there was an argument made that they got to continue to construct to secure, for national security reasons, like the occupants. In other words, it's not great to have an open hole of Donald Trump's own making as a nuisance sitting in the middle of the White House compound. And so what Leon obviously wrote is that for that purpose, like to secure the site, go ahead and secure the site, but no vertical construction. You can't have it coming out of the ground. In fact, he says in footnote 21 on page 34, the court gives fair notice to defendants, Trump, that any above ground construction, the vertical, over the next 14 days, while he gave them the time to go file their appeal, which they've done, that is not in compliance with my order, is at risk of being taken down, depending upon the outcome of this case. Of course, that's not what Donald Trump heard. What Donald Trump heard was, oh, I can continue to build the ballroom because of security concerns, because they've had this whole argument that the new ballroom has to be like drone proof and bomb proof and all this other stuff. So here's Donald Trump, obviously purposely misinterpreting the order or not understanding it. Play the clip.
Congressional approval. He also said, but this is positive for us, I'm allowed, that meaning we are allowed to continue building as necessary to, let's see, what is that? To cover the safety and security of the White House and its grounds. So it says here very carefully, the safety and security. have to be protected in the White House grounds. Well, that's what we're doing because everything's bulletproof glass, et cetera, including the ballroom. And then it goes construction and all of the things necessary. It says personal safety of the president and his staff are a part of that. So it talks about that we're allowed to continue building. In other words, he put an order on, and even that he gave 14 days. We don't need it because that's what we're doing. He's allowed to continue building as necessary. And when it talks about the safety and security of the White House and its grounds. So just so you know, I wrote some of the thing down. We have a drone-proof roof, and it talks about the president and his staff. Well, we don't have a lot of bulletproof glass. The White House was built a long time ago. This has the highest level of, in fact, they call this grass, the glass.
All right. You see he's wandering off again. That's not what the order said. Okay. The order talked about a big giant hole and the need to secure that hole so that it can't be exploited for security purposes. Not that it can build this big, beautiful, ugly royal ballroom and talk about, there's rumors he can't read, and him trying to read aloud was painful to watch. Let me try. Here's on page 33 of the order. Defendants predictably object, arguing that any delay to construction would imperil national security and expose the White House to damage. Grasping for straws, defendants call the construction site a coordinated and managed safety hazard that has disrupted existing security procedures, the giant hole. Thus, according to defendants, any construction delay will undermine national security. Wait for the next word by Judge Leon. And it is, please. He literally wrote, please, ! Please. While I take seriously the government's concerns regarding the safety and security of the White House grounds and the president himself, the existence of a, quote, large hole, close quote, beside the White House is, of course, a problem of President Trump's own making, one of the 18 ! Bald assertions of national security cannot excuse the government's failure to follow the law. And it's clear that when he wrote in his order, which is the companion to the memorandum, he wrote that everything must stop, that they're enjoined from taking any action in furtherance of the physical development of the proposed ballroom at the former site of the East Wing, including but not limited to further demolition, site prep work, landscape, excavation, foundation work, or other construction other than action strictly necessary to ensure the safety and security of the White House and its grounds, including the site. That's the fumbling, mumbling that Donald Trump was just doing right there. No, he's not talking about the security, enhanced security of your glass around your ballroom at all. Now we're going to have to see if the DC federal appellate court is going to give a stay. I'm not sure they will, but we'll find out. And then, or he'll lob a grenade into the United States Supreme Court, trying to get an emergency something or other to allow for the continued construction of the ballroom. And of course, the vote on Thursday, which will go forward to approve, quote unquote, the plans. So what's the takeaway? It's a great decision. I posted it on Legal AF Substack for paid members to read. You should read anything that Judge Leon writes. It's just great. And you can count the 18. You can make it a drinking game or a coffee drinking game of the 18 ! And how many pleases he please. You can just hear him rolling his eyes when he wrote this or had it written for him. So that's our ballroom update. Let me turn to finally to birthright citizenship and invite everybody first. And the links are going to be below in the note to join us tomorrow at 9:45 in the morning Eastern time for our live presentation of the Supreme Court's oral argument about birthright citizenship. I'll be there at 9:45. I'll give a brief watching guide, spirit guide for the first 15, 20 minutes. John Roberts will come on, oyez, oyez, calling the case to order, and then American Civil Liberties Union versus John Sauer. I mean, that's what we're going to listen to for 2+ hours. on this particular issue. So take a moment, go over to Legal AF YouTube, become a member, and while you're there, hit a reminder for the show tomorrow and our presentation of it. And because of you, we regularly beat the live presentations of the same stream by CNN and MS Now and C-SPAN and you name it. Ours generally gets the higher audience. I really do appreciate each and every one of you being there. I'm usually in the chat trying to explain things as they happen on the fly. Let me frame it briefly for tomorrow. The birthright citizenship case came out of a series of federal court orders all against the Trump administration. I think it was 7-0. From Seattle, Washington to Boston, Massachusetts, down to Maryland and California and everything else. The reason we haven't spoken about the impact of it yet is because those courts stopped Trump from imposing his executive order, which declared that despite the 14th Amendment, despite the language of two citizenship statutes passed by Congress in 1940 and 1952, that the fact that they all say all persons born or naturalized in the United States are, and subject to the jurisdiction thereto, are citizens of the United States and of the state in which they reside, despite that very clear, unambiguous language and all of the legislative history about the origin story behind that amendment in 1868, reinforced by the Supreme Court in 1898, reinforced by Congress in 1940, and again in 1952. Despite all of that, forget all that, says the Trump administration. It's really about babies of newly freed slaves. Who says that? That constitutional scholar and historian, Donald Trump, who's already bashing, he's not working the refs, he's tormenting and crapping on the refs, the Supreme Court, before they even hear oral argument, which is usually a tell that he knows he's about to lose. He did the exact same thing with the tariffs decision because his argument is completely upside down. I happen to have my trusted copy of the United States Constitution. You guys will carry one of these around? This is, it's my toolbox. And if you look at the 14th Amendment, it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Done. Now, it may have come out of an era where we were grappling as a nation with what it meant to be an American and who could be an American, right? And the gatekeeping about who would be let in and who wouldn't be, and what we were going to do with the newly freed slave Black American population. And a Supreme Court decision that is so terrible and such a scar on the United States Supreme Court, although they've done a couple recently, that when it was discussed in my law school class in 1988, it drew gasps from the audience, from the student body, about Dred Scott, which was a declaration by the United States Supreme Court that under the Constitution, that human beings that happened to be Black, that were born in the United States, would not be considered citizens. And this was a reaction to that. But it also was Congress wading in to an existential debate about what kind of nation were we? And were we going to allow naturalized people to be citizens and people born here to be citizens regardless of their parents? Were we going to fulfill the ideals of George Washington, one of our founding fathers, where he wrote famously in a letter, and I'm paraphrasing, the United States is not just going to welcome the royals and the wealthy, but we're going to welcome all people of the world, regardless of their economic status and social status, into the United States. Are we going to fulfill that prophecy or that promise? And for those here in the intersection audience and on Legal AF and on Midas Touch, I think the answer is a resounding, we need to. But for Donald Trump, much like President McKinley a million years ago, he wants to redefine what it means to be a citizen. He's probably totally into the heritage citizen. 4 generations my family's been here. 5 generations. What does that make you better than me? Or anybody in our audience? I'm the second generation. My wife's naturalized. That doesn't make you, and I'm talking outside of our audience, that doesn't make you more of a patriot than me or our audience. And we don't want to divide our country, do we? I know Donald Trump spends a considerable amount of time of his political capital trying to divide us, but we don't want to divide this country into, oh, you're a citizen? How did that happen? When did that happen? How many generations ago did that happen? Is that what we want? That the melting pot of the United States, or fruit salad, whatever you want to call it these days, is important to our origin story. It's the Statue of Liberty. It's the welcoming of the downtrodden, of the poor, the huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, coming in to the United States. We might as well send the statue back to France if we're going to allow, through the Supreme Court, the destruction of our birthright citizenship. Now, there's an easy exit ramp for the Supreme Court. I'll know within 30 minutes whether they're going to take it or not. See, there's a principle of judicial restraint. I know it's hard to put into the same sentence this Supreme Court and MAGA and judicial restraint, because it's the most activist court and legislative court we've ever seen. But John Roberts has been known, when he wants to exercise some judicial restraint, because the Supreme Court is, despite present appearances, a court of limited jurisdiction. It is not supposed to take on constitutional issues only when it has to, only as a measure of last resort. And so it's very easy to dispatch of this case against the Trump administration. You say to Mr. Sauer, you take the position that the framers or the amendment drafters of the 14th Amendment, Section 1, the Citizens Clause, in 1868 did so in the wake of the Civil War, and that it was to address newly freed slaves. Is that your position? Yes. And that you're trying through executive order just to return to the historical tradition. Is that your argument? Yes. Then how do you explain 30 years later, in 1898, a case involving a U.S. baby born of Chinese parents who tried to go to China and to return, and have the Supreme Court say that that child is an American citizen, regardless of the citizenship status or immigration status of his parents? And that was 1898, within a generation of the 1868 amendment. And they don't come up with some sort of, well, you know, John Sauer, man, he'll pack 100 pounds of potatoes into a 10-pound sack. And you know, you think he's getting paid by the minute, by the word. And so he'll try to wear out and try to burn off the ears of the Supreme Court with some sort of ridiculous argument that nobody can follow. I'm not even sure he can follow. And he'll do so, oh, well, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, that doesn't just mean diplomats, and they'll say, okay, all right, I've heard your argument on that. Then how do you explain in 1940, the Congress of the United States passed a definition of citizenship in Title VIII of the U.S. Code that defined it exactly the same way? All persons born in the United States or naturalized therein as being citizens. That couldn't have been newly freed slave concepts in 1940, right? And then, of course, they'll go through the legislative history where people at the time of the passage of the 14th Amendment said out loud that this is not only for newly freed slaves, because this is a sad historical note. People with the Constitution know how to write slaves into the Constitution when they wanted to. That's one of the original sins of the first draft of the Constitution before amendment, even after amendment, is that it mentions slavery as being an okay thing. So they know how to write slaves, children of slaves, descendants of slaves when they want to. And they didn't. They used that all-powerful, all-embracing, all persons. Not all persons with proper documented immigration status, whose parents are the daughters or sons of the American Revolution, which is what Donald Trump apparently wants to say. All persons. That's why the Fourth Amendment says all persons shall be secure in their homes and their papers. Not all lawful immigrants or those with proper status or those who haven't overstayed their visa, all persons. So he'll have to answer about 1940. And if he comes up with some bullshit answer, then he'll have to answer, well, then what happened in 1952 when the Congress did it again and readopted the exact same expression? You're not claiming that in 1952, what was weighing on the minds of Congress were newly freed slaves, right? Now, this is how I would handle it if I were ever on the United States Supreme Court, right? And I'd love to see a debate like that break out. So if John Roberts wants to lead the court through oral argument or otherwise to a safe exit ramp, he takes them through the 1940 and 1952 law and says an executive order that violates those laws that have not been taken off the books by Congress is invalid, not unconstitutional, is against the law and illegal. And then they never even have to touch the 14th Amendment. But if they want to go there, they can go there too. I'm just giving them an easy out, a path of least resistance. If they want to go there, they can say, and as long as we're here, we also think your reading of the 14th Amendment is full of water. It's full of mud. It's full of water. And we're not going to adopt it. And let them declare once and for all what it means to be an American. And that Donald Trump's social media posts, let me just read this one to you in case you didn't catch it. And I love how he uses xenophobia, the Chinese again, which is what the 1898, somebody must have told him the 1898 case is about a Chinese family. And here's what Donald Trump wrote yesterday. Birthright citizenship is not about rich people from China and the rest of the world who want their children and hundreds of thousands more for pay to become citizens of the United States of America. It's about the babies of slaves. Oh, God. Who's giving him? This is like when Bugs Bunny tried to give his nephew a history lesson and the kid failed with an F plus or an F minus. Who gave him this info? Who's teaching Donald Trump basic social studies and history? We are the only country in the world that dignifies this subject with even discussion. Wrong. Look at the dates of this long ago legislation. I love it. The Constitution is long ago too. The exact end of the Civil War. The world is getting rich, selling citizenships. See, this is what Donald Trump wants to do. This is what Ronald Reagan did with the imagery of the welfare queen. This is Donald Trump. Birth tourism. Chinese are buying. The birth tourism is such an infinitesimal, even my printer's getting excited, an infinitesimal percentage of people. We're talking about people that are here already in America under various immigration status or asylum status or temporary status or a student visa or a business or vacationing, and they give birth. That kid's an American. That kid's American. And I don't want to live in an America where that baby is not an American. Do you? And if you do, why do you? Again, I'm not talking to our audience. I'm using our audience. I'm talking beyond our audience. But I'm going to know, you're going to know within the first half an hour of a 2-hour oral argument tomorrow where this, if there are 5 votes or more. And it's hard to tell with them. 6-3, they tore down the tariffs with Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts voting with the moderates. Today, 8-1. Everybody but Ketanji Brown Jackson allowing conversion therapy, allowing therapists to tell kids that they don't have to be gay, and here's how. They framed it as a First Amendment argument, and Gorsuch wrote the opinion, and Ketanji Brown Jackson said, no, it's a state licensure regulation, and if somebody wants to practice quackery, like drink Drano or Windex for COVID, right? Or is that the next step? Is that the next step? Oh, it's First Amendment. It's First Amendment to say don't take vaccines for any communicable disease, polio, meningitis, measles. This sounds like our public health officials, led by RFK Jr. Is that where we're going? That was a danger. I'm going to talk more about that case. That was a dangerous case for its ramifications and how under a Trump administration they could be exploited. But that was 8-1. I think this is going to be 6-3, 7-2 or so in favor of birthright citizenship. I'm troubled slightly that they took the case, because they could have said, nope, the 1898 case was fine for us. We don't need to revisit it. I guess I take some hope that they didn't reverse any of the decisions of the federal courts about this issue, although the Trump administration said they weren't going to enforce the executive order until they got clearance from the Supreme Court. So we have that. Now, and the last thing I'll mention is that some people might be thinking, didn't we do a birthright citizenship oral argument already over the summer last year? Close, or the spring, close. This case split into half. Half the case was a procedural issue about whether federal district court judges at the trial court level have the power to issue nationwide injunctions as a remedy for some constitutional or statutory violation that they determine. And it came out, not usually. You can do class actions, and you can issue an injunction based on that. And maybe if you're a state, you can ask for a nationwide injunction, but generally you can't. That's for the Supreme Court to declare. But they didn't get to the merits of the birthright citizenship issue. They postponed that until April Fool's Day, tomorrow. So once again, join Legal AF for our presentation of the birthright citizenship oral argument. You can find in the notes below, you can find the link, become a Legal AF YouTube supporter by becoming a member. There it is there. We do 12 videos a day, some fascinating interviews you won't find anywhere else in YouTube world, only on Legal AF YouTube. Of course, Legal AF Substack, another great place to find fellowship and community where we're all sort of vibrating on the same frequency. And I do live reporting there tomorrow with Scott McFarlane at around noon. Well, I'll wait till after the oral argument so I can comment on the oral argument. Then I'll bring Scott McFarlane, formerly of CBS, onto our show. And then lastly, have you heard? Legal AF and The Intersection are both finalists, top 5 for Podcast of the Year by the Webbies. Yes, it's like our Oscars. And you can vote for The Intersection and Legal AF. It's a 2-week campaign. 2 weeks from now, they're going to stop all the balloting, stop all the voting. This is early voting I can get behind. And they're going to declare the popular vote or the People's Choice winner for news, that's Legal AF, and for Best New Podcast, that's The Intersection. And with your help, I think we can take the People's Choice Award in both categories, following on the heels of the Midas Touch brothers, who won Webby of the Podcast of the Year last year. So down in the links below, you will find links to vote. You can vote once, but you can get friends and family to vote too. And I'd appreciate your support. Thank you for being here on The Intersection. Without you, we would have no show. We'd have no network. We'd have no channel. And with you, we are so strong and able to overcome the Trump administration and lead us to victory at the midterms. So I'll see you tomorrow night on Midas Touch Network for Legal AF, the podcast, Saturday with Ben Meiselas and me on Legal AF, and every day, and it seems like every hour, on Legal AF, the YouTube channel, and Midas Touch. I'm Michael Popok. Until my next report, shout out to the Midas Mighty, the Legal AFers, and the Intersectionists. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.